In this episode of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Dr. Sam Aparicio of BC Cancer. Sam, thanks for joining me. What's your role there at BC Cancer?
I'm the Nan and Lorraine Robertson Chair of Breast Cancer and a title of Distinguished Scientist at BC Cancer. But what I really do is I lead a research group on a daily basis that's looking into the genomics of cancer.
So what does your day look like? You get up in the morning and you go to work. What do you do?
Yeah, every day is different, and we certainly have our share of challenges. The greatest challenge, of course, is to figure out what the important problems are and find out how research can help us address those. And of course, we have to operationalize our research, and that does take a lot of time. We spend time recruiting people, enthusing them about the research, talking with our clinical colleagues, raising funding, dealing with all manner of things. It's like running a startup.
So do you actually get to put your head down and dig into the research, or are you kind of managing the team?
I absolutely get into the research. It's my role to enthuse and orientate the scientists that we have in our research team. Of course, we're always recruiting people who have their own ideas, and I'm always trying to support people to develop their own ideas. But we function partly as a training background. We take in students and trainees with every level of experience. And we have to mentor people in how to ask a good question. It's like the hardest thing in science.
So you're doing that work, you're mentoring them. Do you have an administrative role in running this team as well? Because you say it's a lot like running a startup.
It is a lot like running a startup. You have to have an idea. The product in the end is knowledge and understanding. But the way that we generate that product involves having to raise funding for it, so we have to justify why our questions are important. We have to write those proposals and raise the money. We have to decide how to spend it. We have to recruit the people. We have to make sure that the science is working in the way that we think it should, and interpret the results and so on and so on. It's a never-ending job.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, okay, you went into university to start to do research, and you became a researcher. You're focused on that. But now when you're having to justify why somebody has to fund, you have to write the report that adds further weight to that. Those are other skills that you had to develop.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And I went to university to study medicine originally. I trained as a physician, and when I completed my medical training and some medical specialty training, I just so fell in love with the idea of research and discovering knowledge that it really became my passion. I was fortunate enough to work with a very famous and experienced scientist in the University of Cambridge, where I started my career. And I learned a huge amount from him, from Sidney Brenner, who was my mentor, about the conceptual side of science, like how to think about hard problems, how to have ideas. But I didn't learn anything from Sidney about the practical business of science, which you just referred to, which is you have to write a grant. So how are you going to organize your ideas? Those are all learned skills, things that you have to pick up along the way.
So you started at Cambridge, and where did your career lead you as you left that incredible institution?
Yeah, I was there. I started as an undergraduate. I completed my medical training, eventually took a PhD there. And then I had my research group was actually in Cambridge. I had also a small biotech company that I'd founded there up until about 2005, when BC Cancer, as now is, and UBC were wanting to establish a new program particularly in breast cancer, but in the genomics of cancer. It was building on all of the investments that have been made here in genomics. And so I saw a great opportunity to have a new scientific program and moved over, 2005.
Okay, I picked up on the fact that you had a biotech company that you were running on the side as well.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? Yeah. And how were you able to do that along with your other duties?
Yeah, so that came about because, at the time we started that company, the Human Genome Project was at a stage where we were learning about many fragments of the human genome. The full genome was not yet known and assembled, but what we could see was that there were fragments of new genes appearing that related to genes whose function we knew, but these new genes, we couldn't tell anything about them other than that they were related. And so we decided to use genetics in mice initially, and then moving into genetics in humans, to identify the new functions of these new genes that were being discovered at the time for therapeutic purposes. And we started a company to commercialize that idea. That ran quite successfully for about 15 years until it was acquired.
Oh, so you were able to sell it?
Yeah, it became part of one of the big pharma sites in Cambridge. Yeah.
And then you were trying to come to British Columbia. So this is a big departure. What was it that made coming to BC and having this opportunity so attractive that you were willing to say, okay, I'm going to move on beyond the success that I'm already having here in Cambridge?
Yeah, there was a fantastic opportunity here, and the opportunity came from a few different directions. But what was really important was I could see that there was a strong community of researchers here, particularly in genomics, which is the field I had been occupied, for my early part of my career. Also, very strong interest from clinical colleagues at BC Cancer in seeing research conducted that had a translational element to it. And that enthusiasm, the joint enthusiasm of my clinical colleagues and the fact that there was a vibrant genomics community growing here seemed like a very fertile ground for starting a new program. And there was a desire to have a new program in the genomics and science of breast cancer. Yeah.
And you've continued in that role and continued to expand its reach and scope.
Yeah, the last 19 years, I've been in BC now for 19 years. It's been quite a journey, and I feel very fortunate and privileged to be here. The scientific opportunities have been amazing. I think we've made some important strides in cancer. So I'd say it's been a success, and something that I hope we can transmit to the next generation, because we need to keep training and enthusing young people to enter science.
Well, on that note, if there's a young person watching this right now and they go, well, I want to be like you, what would you say are personal characteristics or traits that you possess that you think have been important in your career, to you in your career and your career development?
I think some things I realized early and were more about motivation. And I realized quite early that I was quite passionate about the idea of learning something new about the way the world works that nobody else understood. So making a discovery, oh, it works that way, and no one else knows. It's like being at the top of a mountain for the first time. You kind of see over the edge and you can see what's there. And I got exposed to that very early in my undergraduate life at Cambridge, because there were practicing scientists around who had that kind of philosophy and were doing that kind of science. And so I got exposed to it early, and I guess I got bitten by the bug. Yeah, that was important. I learned other things later on, like you have to have persistence. I learned that from my PhD mentor, who would often come into the lab with a fresh idea, only to have the idea torn apart by his students, okay? We all like to dismantle his ideas, but then he would come back, a week later, and he'd fixed up the problems in his argument and, would go for, and I learned over time that it was this persistence, like just chipping away at the problem. That's another characteristic.
Well, I think that chipping away at a problem with those small incremental improvements is what leads to actual great discoveries about oneself and the work that you're doing.
I think a lot of science does happen that way. It tends to get characterized as there's a eureka moment, and there are sometimes moments where you realize there's a transition from the old to the new way of looking at things. But a lot of what we do in science is that we're building up on foundations of understanding that have come from many other researchers.
Well, wasn't it Asimov who said you don't have these great eureka moments, you have little moments that you go, oh, well, that's kind of weird, or I wasn't expecting that, and then you follow it.
That's right, yeah. So this idea of, you see something unexpected and you think, okay, I should drill into this and find out why. There is quite a lot of that in science. And in fact, coming up with unexpected answers is almost the most exciting thing.
Well, it's, I see you light up when you talk about that, because it must be thrilling. But do some of those moments come to you at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to get up and write this down?
Yeah, sometimes that happens, or out on a run or something. Sometimes the mind works in unusual ways, and sometimes it's not when you're thinking hardest about the problem, but when you're relaxing and thinking about something else that the idea comes to you about. I think that's quite common in science.
From the outside, because I'm not a scientist, it looks like a thrilling career, but one that comes to you in a collection of moments that coalesce into something where you're actually making a difference.
Yeah, I think it's not, the day-to-day is varied. It isn't all eureka moments, but there are certainly times when the pace of understanding and discovery accelerates. And I think in the genomics field, we've been through that really for the last 20 years. We've had a sort of tsunami of discoveries that have come from the new genomics of cancer.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us a little insight into your career and the world in which you live. But most importantly, thank you for the work that you do.
Well, thank you.